Dragons are the ultimate fantasy creatures, and The Lord of the Rings invented the modern fantasy genre. It's no surprise that Tolkien, who put decades into his world building, would produce some of the most dangerous and cunning dragons out there. Today, we'll be analyzing the power levels, Dragon Ball Z style, of 4 of his most famous dragons: Scatha, Smaug, Glaurung, and Ancalagon the Black. Scatha was a long worm who lived in the northern part of Middle-earth during the Third Age, about 1,000 years before The Lord of the Rings took place. We really don't know much else about him, other than he was killed by the Eothid leader Fram, an ancestor of the Rohirrim. We don't know how hard he was to kill, or how strong he was, but if a strong human warrior managed to take him down, he probably wasn't that scary. We'll tentatively place him at around building level by virtue of the size that Tolkien dragons seem to normally attain. With Scatha, it's really all guesswork. Smaug, however, is the most famous of Tolkien's dragons, and his recent appearance in the Hobbit movies redefined the standard for cinematic dragons. His power, charisma, and arrogant cunning form the quintessential evil worm of Western mythology and medieval fears. The dwarves were right to be afraid of him. Smaug was enormous. Although Tolkien never provided an official measurement, we know that when he tried to breathe fire at Bilbo through the 5-foot-tall secret passageway, only his nostrils could fit through. That provides an absolute minimum size of his skull of around 6 feet tall, although it's likely much, much larger. He shattered a cliffside with blows of his tail, his wing beats had the force of a storm front, and when he fell on Laketown, full on, as the book describes it, he destroyed it completely. It's safe to say that he's at least several hundred feet long. His size in the movies, between 130 and 152 meters in length, seems to be fairly accurate. He's also incredibly strong. As mentioned, he casually destroyed a cliff with his tail, but what's really impressive is his shaking of the entire lonely mountain with his rage. Tolkien describes him as shaking the mountain roots, meaning that he was generating enough energy to move the entire structure from bottom to top. That's easily a city-level feat, not to mention his destruction of Dale and Laketown with minimal effort. Smaug displays a use of the dragon spell, as if his physical prowess wasn't enough. The mere sight of his eyes is enough to telepathically influence Bilbo to reveal himself, and although it didn't work in this case, it shows that Smaug is more than just a dumb brute. He has an amazing sense of smell and a photographic memory, able to notice when one tiny cup goes missing from his hoard. Add in his flight, and fire-breathing that can burn an entire mountainside, and Smaug is clearly a force to be reckoned with. During the Third Age, at least. Smaug was an average Joe in the First Age, when the truly powerful dragons were still around. That brings us to the father of dragons, Glaurung himself. Glaurung differed from Smaug in a few key points. He was the prototype, so he didn't have wings, and he likely wasn't as fast. But man, this guy was evil. He was less concerned with stealing gold and more dedicated to wiping out civilizations and using his Professor X-level telepathy to create incestual bonds between his enemies. The raw power of his dragon spell made Smaug look like a conjurer of cheap tricks. He paralyzed Túrin for hours, making him watch as his family was taken captive by orcs, and later he completely erased the memories of Túrin's sister simply by looking at her. When it comes to combat, Glaurung was no pushover either. When he was half-grown and without his armor, he drove away an elvish army and destroyed the fields of Argalin, an area about 150 by 200 miles across. When fully grown, now that his armor made him immune to elvish weaponry, he attacked again at the head of an army of Balrogs, and with their help covered the entire ruined plain with fire. Just being near this guy was like walking into the blast zone of a nuclear warhead. The elves who survived only did so because of the dwarves arriving with fireproof armor and anti-dragon axes. The strongest First Age elves were comparable to the solar system level Maiar, including the Balrogs, so the fact that Glaurung routed them so easily is telling. He also should at least scale to the Balrogs themselves, since Morgoth placed him in charge of them. Whether or not Glaurung was quite Silmaril level is uncertain, but being stronger than a Balrog lands him in demigod tier by itself. Meanwhile, there's Ancalagon the Black, the strongest dragon in the history of Middle-earth. By scaling alone, remember, the Balrogs injured an Ungoliant who'd absorb the source of all the universe's stars, he's at very least solar system level. But let's explore his feats and supporting scalings to strengthen his case. He only appears in one paragraph in the Silmarillion, but we get a surprising amount of information from it. We learn that he's the mightiest of the dragon host, now that Morgoth has perfected the form. We learn that he fights Orendil for about 24 hours and is eventually killed, but not before driving back an army of First Age elves and Maiar. We also learn that in his death, he destroys Thangorodrim's peaks, which end-to-end measure around 135 miles. That's an area about half the length of Scotland. First, there are a couple ways to interpret this. Either Ancalagon was so massive that he crushed the countryside under his bulk, or he was so strong that him rashing around was the equivalent of a 150 Sar bombas going off at once. Maybe it's somewhere in between. Second, that's more supporting scaling. The fact that Ancalagon and his dragons drove back the host of the Valar is insane. That army included at least Eonwe, who the Valar considered nearly their equal, and possibly some of the Valar themselves, according to the Complete Guide of Middle-earth. If that's true, there were multiple solar system level or higher soldiers that Ancalagon fought. The Valar built the physical universe, and Tolkien stated that the strongest Maiar were nearly as powerful as they were. Third, this means Ancalagon was incredibly fast if he fought Eärendil. Eärendil's ship, Vingilot, had been hollowed with divine energy by the Valar, and while he piloted it, it radiated so much energy that it could be seen in space. Eärendil regularly flew on the ship into deep space, described as the starless voids, and would return within a day. That's easily faster than light travel, and Ancalagon was fast enough not only to react to him, but to match him for a full day and night. If anything, considering how the Valar built the universe and how close the strongest Maiar were to them, this is lowballing Ancalagon just a little bit. An argument could be made for multi-solar system level or galaxy level for anyone who approaches the Valar, but I'll be conservative here. So, yeah, there's a huge range in power within the Draconic race as designed by Tolkien. We have anywhere from basic giant lizards like Scatha to cosmically powerful titans like Ancalagon. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like Lord of the Rings or dinosaurs, go ahead and subscribe.